Hi, I'm Kevin Myers, and welcome back to The Roast. And we've gotten more professional. As you can see, we're in front of the green screen now. So that's pretty great. We're not in a terrible room with terrible lighting. We have the normal studio lights. In fact, we're in the exact same studio where we record the normal 24/7 news anyway. That doesn't matter. So today we're going to talk about the ridiculous iPhone 7 commercial. Now, this isn't a very new commercial. It came out a while ago, back when the iPhone 7 was first released. This commercial, it was the onions commercial. Had a purple onion in it, and you might remember where they had shot it on an iPhone 7 in 4K, and somehow it made it to theaters. Became really big. We're not going to talk about the unrealistic aspect of making it to theaters, because that's just obvious. They don't have a distribution company like Fountain Pictures or anything. But seriously, we're not going to talk about that today. What we are going to talk about, though, is how ridiculous the claim that a iPhone 7 camera is just as good as a cinematography camera somehow, because it's obviously not, and we're going to discuss that. But first, I will defend Apple. Their iPhone 7 probably does have one of the best cameras on the market. It's probably a little better than the Microsoft Lumia 950's camera, even with that pretty cool Carl Zeiss lens. That's only a 1080p camera. It actually might be 720p. I'm pretty sure it's 1080 though. Anyway, it's probably on par with the Samsung Galaxy S7, but the S8 is obviously better because it's a newer phone. Anyway, so the problem with this is all the features, we actually talked about this back in the second episode ever of 24/7 News, like all the features that cinematography grade cameras have, even some features that the DSLR we're using has, the iPhone 7 doesn't have. And also how 4K isn't really 4K without some other necessary aspects. So, first of all, a cinematography camera is going to be better than an iPhone 7 as far as resolution goes, because they're going to have probably close to 100 megapixels, or at least, above somewhere in the range of 50 to 100 megapixels on that camera, whereas the iPhone 7, we've looked it up previously, there's only 12 megapixels on that camera. For comparison, the camera we're using to record this is recording at 1080p at 30 frames per second and has an 18 megapixel optical sensor, and you can actually tell it actually looks better than footage from an iPhone because it has the higher megapixel count, which helps a lot. So that part is the biggest thing. Is 4K is the biggest part. The whole reason to switch to 4K is it's sharper. Also, it's easier to. It's better for editing and post. You can scale stuff up and down easily, but because it's super sharp, but you can't do that with the iPhone 7 because it has a low megapixel count. You probably should have more than 18 megapixels because this, again, is only a 1080p camera and it looks fine, but it's not being marketed as a cinema grade camera replacement like the iPhone 7 is. Another huge thing is optical image stabilization. Now, iPhones do have better optical image stabilization than a lot of other smartphones on the market, but it's still not very good, especially when you compare it to actually the cameras we used to record with, but we don't anymore. They had literally the best optical image stabilization I've ever seen on a camera. It's better than the DSLR we're using, which is why usually with the DSLR we do still shots on a tripod like this, because it's just not as smooth as that one. Like the optical image stabilization at 60 frames per second at 1080p, which is what we used to record at, was amazing. It was really smooth. The problem with those cameras, though, the reason why we switched to this one, is a little off track, but it's because we looked it up, like it just seemed less sharp than this, but we looked it up, they only had a 3.28 megapixel sensor. So those cameras were actually, the images would have been duller or less sharp than an iPhone 6 or an iPhone 7, or probably even sharper than an iPhone 5, just to put it in perspective. But the other problem, besides just raw megapixel count and optical image stabilization, is coloring. The iPhone 7 camera, it's good by phone standards. The coloring is not very good by any real standards, though. Like, I bet I don't know if you can even do this because it's usually used for scoring monitors. Put it on the Adobe RGB spectrum, it probably would do pretty terribly. If you took just raw footage, I doubt it would do that well because the footage tends to be like very dull colors again, whereas you're going to get much more vibrant colors, or at least much more cinematic looking colors on a cinema grade camera. And also just the price difference. Do you really think that if Red, a camera manufacturer, is selling just a body that's no lens, no screen, no battery even, it's kind of a rip-off, but that's a topic for another day. But so that camera, the Red camera, just they call it the brain, which is really just a CPU with an optical image sensor. That's all you get. That alone costs about $50,000. And if you think that somehow Apple can make something like that for $1,000 plus a whole other computer that can do all sorts of things, that's just ridiculous. They're obviously putting something extra into it if it costs that much money to buy just the brain. And you're not getting a lens, you're not getting a battery, you don't get any microphone imports, you have to buy an adapter, which costs another like $1,000. Anyway, they're really expensive, the Red cameras. So obviously, just look at the price. $50,000, around $700. No way that's this good. So that's pretty much it for the segment. Is basically that's all there is to it, is that Apple is basically just lying to you. And I'm actually going to bring back the distribution thing, even though we said we would not talk about it. Obviously, it couldn't get to theaters because if you're posting this to Snapchat, it's not going to theaters. First of all, it's about an onion. It's less than 2 minutes long, the actual video. Obviously, why would it ever make it to theaters? Second, you need a distribution company to get to theaters. Like, I don't know, Time Warner, like Warner Brothers Studios is one example. Another great one is Paramount or Disney. You need to be working with someone like that, or Sony Pictures. Just, duh. That's a no-brainer. It's not going to theaters. If you buy an iPhone 7 because you think your video of you eating a waffle is going to make it to Regal Cinemas, there's something wrong with your brain. I'm sorry. That's just delusional. Anyway, thanks for watching, and don't forget to check out the final episode 24/7 News, which is being uploaded on the same day as this video, which is June 1st. Thanks for watching.